Welcome to the Academy of Art University Library's Internet Research tutorial. In this video, I'll explain the basic concepts of evaluating information from the Internet, and we'll go over several examples. First, why is it important to evaluate information you find on the Internet? You can find great information on the Internet, but since anyone can post information online, finding reliable information isn't always easy. When you evaluate the quality of information you find, you're using information evaluation skills. You've probably used them in your daily life and haven't realized it. For example, you make decisions on what you buy, where you live, and what classes you take. Comparing and contrasting different sources of information, such as a review of a product, commercial for the product, and your own experience with the product or brand, will help you conclude whether or not you should purchase that product. Knowing how to evaluate information will help you make important decisions, whether it's in your daily life or in your work as an artist or designer. And yes, this is relevant to artists and designers. In your industries, there will be times when you need to find information for an employer, a client, a buyer, or simply to make sure that you have information to negotiate on your own behalf. Let's say you've been asked to make a proposal for a new project. Your employer or project manager will likely expect you to research potential impacts and benefits of the project before approving it. Or perhaps you request an organization or individual to fund a project of your own. Similarly, you will likely need to show impacts and benefits of your project, perhaps information about the cost, materials needed, timeline, audience, and what makes it more likely to succeed, or what makes it different from other projects of its kind. Accurate, reliable information will help you make the most persuasive proposal. So how do you evaluate information? One way is to simply ask yourself who, what, where, when, and why. I'll go over this in more detail. We'll start with who. Who is responsible for the content? You'll want to look for an author's name and a publisher's name. Author bios, about, and frequently asked question pages can all be helpful when trying to determine the content creator's credibility. It's important to establish that the author or publisher has the credentials or qualifications to write on the topic. Sometimes this qualification means that they are experts on the topic. Other times, it will mean that they're a respected reporter or news organization. Our next question word is what, as in, what does it contain? What makes up the resource? Does it have sources listed, or link to sources, or at least mention them? Is it well written? Does it have proper grammar and correct punctuation? If it's making an argument, is it a strong argument? Finally, is it on your topic or only slightly related? Sometimes students give up easily on their research and choose the thing that is only tangentially related to their topic in order to meet their reference requirement. Make sure you find information that easily relates to your topic. It will make it much easier for you when you start your assignment. Where did you find the resource? Did you find it on a reputable website? Is it a book, a blog post, an editorial, a newspaper, or an organization website? Are you familiar with the place that you found it? If you're unsure that the resource you found is reputable, you can always research where you found it to see if the website has a respected reputation. When was the content published? Has it been updated recently? Is the content too outdated for your research? Or is it okay for you to use an older source? Sometimes you may even want an older source to compare with newer information. Finally, we have why, which is probably the most important thing to consider when you're evaluating information. Why did someone create this content? Was it created to persuade you, sell you something, inform you, or to entertain you? Is it free from overt bias? Is it upfront with its motives, or are they hidden? This can be the hardest thing to discern on a website, especially if you're unfamiliar with an issue. That's why it's important to compare and contrast the information you find. Sometimes you'll notice conflicting information, both in life and during research. So what should you do? One option is to look closer at the sources involved. Can you justify trusting one source over the other? Or do you need to dig deeper and maybe look at even more sources to see where they agree and disagree? Another option is to remember that a source can be helpful even if it shows only one side of an issue. You can use that source along with other sources that present different viewpoints to demonstrate your understanding of the issue and make sure that what you present is based on well-rounded research. Now we'll examine a few websites. While looking at a site, ask yourself, is it a good source, a bad source, or somewhere in between? Make sure you really think about how you came to that conclusion. We'll start with an article on BuzzFeed. Right away, we can find the who, the author. It says he's a staff writer. We can click the link to find a list of other things he's written, but we're not getting much additional information from him about what makes him qualified to write on this topic, since it is not in the area that he claims is his expertise. Moving on, we have the what. This is an article that shows hateful tweets about Miss America being Indian American. The article is really more like a list than an article. It doesn't contain background information, and it doesn't provide much analysis of the topic. The article is very narrow in scope. It's only about the negative and racist tweets, so it isn't giving us a balanced perspective of the reaction to Miss America. It also isn't providing context, like how many positive tweets were posted, so it's difficult to come to many conclusions using just this source. Our where is BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed isn't known for its hard news. It's more of an entertainment site. Most of the stories at the top of the screen are pop culture or humor related. So we've got our who, what, where, and then our when. It's right here. It's a pretty recent article from 2013. Now we're on to the why. I chose this article because of the why. It seems that this article exists to inform us, but there's more to it than that. Note that the article has over 5 million views, which makes sense because it's controversial. The narrow scope and emphasis on racist comments, which many people find shocking, draws in viewers. Only use this source if you need the negative tweets to support a point you are making, and it is part of a larger overview of the topic. Now we'll head to pewresearch.org. I'll go ahead and tell you that I consider this a trustworthy source. Let's take a closer look as I explain how I came to this conclusion. We'll start with who. The who varies from report to report, but all of the reports are published by the Pew Research Center. So what is the Pew Research Center? Let's head over to the About section. It tells us it exists to further research and operates through public opinion surveys. It also lets us know it is nonpartisan, meaning it doesn't favor a certain political view. You can find out more about the organization's goals in the Mission and History section. So far, this looks good. If you're looking for information on the leadership of Pew Research, click on the Leadership and Staff link. Most of these names link to pages about the staff members' credentials and accomplishments. The fact that we can find information on credentials is another way to tell that this site is reputable. It indicates that they want you to trust their information and know they'll need to back up their research with their staff's credentials to gain your trust. If you search for Pew Research, you'll see that respected news organizations, like the Washington Post, quote Pew studies. This lends Pew Research more credibility because it is relied upon by respected news organizations. Now let's look at the what. What does it contain? We can look at the navigation bar in the Topics section or in one of the other tabs that's already labeled with different subjects. One area you should look for in any research report is information on how the research was conducted or the methodology. You can find this information within the in-depth reports Pew publishes. The where is the Pew Research website. We've already discussed the organization, so we'll move on to the when. When varies from report to report, but the publication date of the report and when the data was collected will be present. Finding the publication date is another sign of credibility as well. Overall, this source is useful if you need public opinion information or if you need statistics related to your topic. The source is also good, or trustworthy, as I said before, because it gives us enough information to know who's responsible for what and to understand how conclusions were drawn.
Now we'll compare two articles about the same topic. Each article is an editorial, which is an article in which a writer presents his or her opinion on a topic. One editorial is from the Washington Post. The other is from 538, which is a blog about statistics. Let's contrast the two by using our who, what, where, when, why strategy. The first one was published by Washington Post on June 10, 2014. This editorial was written by W. Bradford Wilcox, a sociology professor, and Robin Fretwell Wilson, the director of a policy program at a law school. The second editorial was published by 538 on June 10, 2014 as well. It is an editorial by Mona Chalabi, who is the lead writer for the site. In my research, I found that she has a background in data analysis. Let's assume that both editorials were written to further the public's knowledge on the topic of violence against women. The author of the 538 editorial has another motive, which is to critique the Washington Post editorial. To figure out which one I trust more, I'm going to evaluate the arguments each editorial makes. Here's the what. Wilcox and Wilson, the authors of the Washington Post editorial, conclude that unmarried women are more likely to be victims of domestic violence than married women. To support their points, they use information from the 4th National Incidence Study of Child Abuse and Neglect and from the U.S. Department of Justice. Chalabi, author of the 538 editorial, disagrees with these conclusions for a few reasons. First, Chalabi criticizes Wilcox and Wilson for not taking into account other factors that contribute to violence against women, and argues that they present an incomplete picture. Chalabi's second point is that Wilcox and Wilson are relying on survey data. The survey in question is a Bureau of Justice Statistics National Crime Victimization Survey. Since it is a survey, it's hard to know how accurate it is. Considering that only half the crimes in the survey were also reported to the police, it makes sense to think that there might be crimes unreported in the survey as well. Finally, Chalabi quotes from Shannon Calatano, author of a study used in the Washington Post editorial. Calatano says that Wilcox and Wilson took some of the study's data about marriage out of context in their editorial. Combined, all of these points call the conclusions of the Washington Post editorial into question. The 538 editorial points out problems in the Post editorial, and it explains why the Post's interpretation of the data should be questioned. This makes the 538 article more convincing to me as a critical reader. The Washington Post is a well-respected newspaper, but just as with any source, you need to critically evaluate it.
That's all for this video. Let's do a quick recap. First, we talked about why you need to evaluate your sources. Next, we went on to talk about how to evaluate your sources. We went through a series of examples and applied information evaluation skills. If you have any questions about what's discussed here, feel free to contact us in the library. You can call us, email us, or visit us on the 6th floor of the 180 Montgomery building.